So let's see, we're going to need some Bibles. I can bring a few in. We're going to go around up them kids, right?
Oh,
Get a little lasso.
Dinosaurs.
I don't.
Oh, yeah. I did read the notice here.
Oh, well, it's in as well. The whole point is just keep a little bit of distance in, right? And we've achieved that right now. So, you know, if you sit in the ones that aren't marked, or if everybody sits in the ones that are marked, it has the same effect. A little bit easier in Bible study too. There's not really enough people for it to be a problem. We are in Exodus. We're picking up where we had left off. I'm going to load my notes here. I think it's chapter 35. We're going to finish chapter 34. I think we might have done a little bit in 35 too. Let me see here. We're doing a lot of skimming today. Oh yeah, we did some 35. I think we did pretty much all of chapter 35. You know, so we're in this section now where there's a lot of, you know, kind of just regulations or descriptions of what's involved in the tabernacle and stuff like that. So we're actually not going to do a ton of reading. We're going to do, I'm going to summarize a lot of these sections and then highlight a few things in them. So first, in chapter 36, the first 7 verses tell us about a couple guys named Bezalel and Oholiab. They're the main guys that the Lord appointed for the work of crafting the tabernacle. And it says they would take the contributions from the people, right? So remember we said Moses had asked the people to give whatever they wanted from the heart, however much they wanted of whatever. You know, their precious gems, their gold, their silver, their yarn, whatever. And then Oholiab and Bezalel, they took those and they used it to craft the tabernacle. And after a while, I mentioned this last week, Moses goes, guys, stop giving us stuff. We've got too much. We got plenty of stuff. And we're going to see a little bit later how much was given. It's quite impressive. So it mentions in verses 8 through 13 that the tabernacle was woven as a single whole tent. Alright, so the whole inner, think of it like if you think of the temple, it's the same setup, right, as the tabernacle. You have this inner tent that has 2 parts. So one that whole thing is woven as one piece. And there's the Holy of Holies, and then there's the holy place. Outside that tent, there's a courtyard. That courtyard is surrounded by another tent. And that's the setup of the temple. So one sort of outward wall and then the inner thing.
So
Yes?
does the outside tent have a roof?
No. Courtyard does not have a roof.
So the courtyard is a tent, but it's more like a fence made out
Yes,
of wood.
or at least I think so. Because
Okay.
that's the way it is in the temple. I didn't check to make absolutely sure. In the temple, the courtyard is open to the air. Right? And in the temple, actually, there's multiple courtyards. So there's the inner one, which is where the Jewish people would go, and there's the outer courtyard, where the Gentiles are supposed to go, and that's the area, by the way, that the people were buying and selling, and Jesus drove them out because they were taking the Gentiles' place of worship. In the tabernacle, there's not anywhere that I've found a mention of this outer courtyard. There's just the single courtyard, and I'm assuming that doesn't have a roof either. I don't know 100% for sure. Anyway, I think that there's something going on here with that all woven of one piece. There's a couple places in the Old Testament where something like that is mentioned. So far, I found 2. This is one, and we talked about the other one a while ago. Anybody remember the other thing that we saw where it mentioned something was woven all of one piece?
Isn't that Jesus?
That's the New Testament thing. I believe that's intentional because when you read in the Gospels and they have Jesus' garment, and it mentions that they divided up his clothing, his garments, but for his clothing they cast lots, while they didn't want to cut it up and divide it. And the reason they didn't want to cut and divide it is because the whole thing was woven of a single piece, which was a more expensive garment than, sewing something on the side. And part of the reason for mentioning that, I think, is is to reflect what's going on with this Old Testament stuff. So the other place besides this in the Old Testament where it mentions something woven all of one piece is the high priest's robe is woven all of one piece. And so that, I think, for sure, is looking forward to Christ. I think this is too. Because as we're going to see in all kinds of ways, the whole point of the tabernacle itself and the temple itself and everything in it is prophetic of Christ. He's the tabernacle. He's the temple of God. It talks. There's a lot of detailing here about how beautifully woven and designed all these things are, and the rest of the chapter has more details about the beauty and intricacy of the temple, and we're going to see more of that. And all of this is to highlight the importance of what's happening there. In chapter 37, verses 1 through 9, it describes the Ark of the Covenant and the destructions God made for that. Yeah.
Where are we?
Ezekiel. Exodus 37. Yep. So in 1 through 9, it talks about the ark, and it mentions it's made of acacia wood. You're going to see this common refrain with all this stuff. It's always made of acacia wood, and then it's overlaid with pure gold. And then there are rings that are built onto it for poles to go through so that the priest can carry it. Because remember, the priest can't touch it. No one can touch the Ark of the Covenant. If they touch it, they die. And that, of course, happens once whereby the thing is on a carriage and it's jostled and the guy reaches out his hands to steady it and he dies. That doesn't mean the guy went to hell or something, but it's God showing the holiness of God versus the sinfulness of man. And a lot of the stuff about the tabernacle and the temple in the Old Testament is meant to highlight that too, which is, of course, why when Jesus dies, we have the veil tearing, showing, our sins separate us from God, but Christ, the true high priest and sacrifice and temple, all of it in one, he brings us to the Father. He reconciles us to the Father. So then it also describes, so you have the ark, it's like this box, right? And then on top of it, sort of like the cover of it, is what is called the mercy seat. And it's made of pure gold, and there are two carved cherubim that are facing each other and looking down like this, and their wings are outspread, their wings are touching each other in the middle. And this is called the mercy seat. Now, there's a psalm that it talks about God. It says, the Lord who sits enthroned upon the cherubim. It's referring to this. This mercy seat is the place where God is showing that he's like, I sit upon the mercy seat. This is my presence in the midst of this tabernacle, in the midst of my people. And it's called the mercy seat because it's where God comes among his people with his mercy. It's also a reflection of the reality of God's reign in heaven. Like we saw in that video from Isaiah. There it's the seraphim, here it's the cherubim. They're two different sorts of angels. Seraph meaning fiery one. Cherub, I don't remember what that means in Hebrew. The seraph is the fiery one there, this burning thing. But anyway, this presence of God there. 10 to 16 describe the table. So there's a table of gold, poles to carry that as well, and the vessels for the table, they're all of gold. That's the table where they will put the bread of the presence. Every day they bake this bread, they set it out there. The priests later get to eat it. Why do you think there's bread? What's the point of having bread set up in the tabernacle and in the temple? What does that symbolize?
Well, that'd be food and also memorial to manna.
I think probably reminds him of that. And of course there's also manna in the ark. And in reference to Jesus, he of course says, I am the bread of life. And then it also serves the purpose of being food for the priests. But nobody besides the priest is supposed to eat it. There is one notable exception to the thing where nobody's supposed to eat that bread except the priests, which is the priests give it to David. And this is there are a number of things about David that are very unusual. Like David at times acts as like prophet, priest, and king. There are times when other kings try to do things like that, and they get like struck with like leprosy and stuff for stepping out of their role. But David is treated differently. And I think the reason for that is the way that he's a picture of Jesus. More so than all the kings of Judah are, but he more so than any of the rest. So they'll give this bread to him, and then Jesus refers to that. On one occasion, people are challenging him about the Sabbath regulations. They're like, you can't do that. And then he says, well, what about David? You guys are obsessed with the particulars of this rule, and David did this, and it was fine. And he's saying, I'm the son of David. I'm and the Lord of David. Okay, then it describes the lampstands. There's 2 lampstands. By the way, let me describe how this is going. You have the Holy of Holies, and inside the Holy of Holies you have the altar of actually, I'm not sure. Inside the Holy of Holies you have the Ark of the Covenant. And then in the holy place, you have the table, the bread of the presence, and you have the lampstand, and you are going to have the altar of incense. That's in the holy place. There isn't an altar in the Holy of Holies. Yes?
And I don't know if we're going to go through this later, but isn't the Holy of Holies the place where they're only allowed to go like once a year?
One guy, once a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did they pick?
It's always the high priest.
The high priest, okay.
Yeah. So, for instance, the thing where you have with Zechariah, where they're taking turn, it's his turn,
Right.
that's not the Holy of Holies.
Right.
That's the holy place. So it's a big deal for him because there's a bunch of priests and they take turns, so he wouldn't get this chance very often. But it wasn't unusual. The priests go into the holy place like all the time, like every day. That's where they do their regular offering and sacrifice. So the people do not go into the holy place ever. Only the priests go into the holy place. They do the offerings there, 2 kinds: altar of incense, where they burn incense, right? It's a pleasing aroma before the Lord. And the altar of sacrifice, although the altar of sacrifice is not in the holy place, it's out in the courtyard. The priests do that too. People can come to that altar. So for instance, when you read about, sometimes there are these rules about like if somebody's in trouble, like they done killed somebody, and they're trying to escape the judgment, they'll like run into the temple or the tabernacle and grab hold of the horns of the altar. That's in the courtyard, outside of the holy place, and it's the altar of sacrifice. And that's the thing, they kind of go there and ask for mercy because God had commanded no shedding of blood in the temple, in the tabernacle. So, anyway, yeah, those are the things you have in the holy place. The table with the bread of the presence, the golden lampstand. Now, the golden lampstand has 7 lights on it. So, and they get offerings of pure beaten olive oil so that it's continually burning. Keep it fed with olive oil so that the light never goes out. What does this remind you of from the New Testament?
The picture of eternity?
So the part where the light never goes out? There's probably some truth to that. Yeah, this light. Yes?
The cloud?
Well, we'll get to the cloud.
Okay.
That's later, but definitely, that's a big thing. First of all, I think just the light. Right? Jesus says, I'm the light of the world. But also, the 7 and lampstands. In John's vision in Revelation, he sees Jesus, and Jesus is standing among 7 golden lampstands. And he tells him that this stands for the church. Each lampstand, he speaks about, then he has the letters to the 7 churches right after that. And he says to each one of them, right, like basically, you're the church, you got this going on, that's great, you got this going on, not so great. You don't fix that, I'm going to come and take away your light, your lampstand. So those lampstands stand for the preaching of the gospel in that church, which is what makes it part of the Holy Christian Church. So that's the G stands for Jesus, stands for the preaching of the gospel, stands for how that makes the church, all those kinds of things. And so it's here in the temple in the holy place, sort of in front of the door to the Holy of Holies. Okay, then it talks about the altar of incense made of acacia wood. It's got horns again, and then it's overlaid with gold poles to carry it. Because remember, everything in the tabernacle's got to be mobile. We're moving this all the time. And then there's also mentions the holy anointing oil they're going to use later. It's sort of like a special formula that they use. It's described in other places for this holy anointing oil. And actually it says, when in the place where it describes it, it says you are not to use this recipe for anything else. This is a special anointing oil for the things of the tabernacle, the temple, for the priests, etc. Then in chapter 38, it talks about the altar of burnt offering. So this is out in the courtyard. It's got horns on all four corners. It's got utensils made of bronze. I was wondering, it's like, why not gold? You guys got any idea? All the other stuff's always all gold.
Gold up mount.
What? Yeah.
Gold mount.
Yeah. I think you'd have trouble using, like, imagine you're on your grill, all right? Because this is essentially what this is. This is a grill. Like a big one, like a holy one. But you take a big animal, you put it on there, you cook it. Then certain parts of it you eat. So if you got your grill, you get your Weber out, and you're trying to use a gold tongs or a gold flipper, you might have some problems. So I'm sure that's why that this is bronze instead of gold, and it's not steel because they didn't have that. Yeah.
Did the altar have rings then too?
Yeah, so they can move it. Yeah, now in the case of like these other things, it's not because you can't touch them. It's to make it easier to carry. So they could put the pole through and pick it up and carry it. The ark remains, so like the ark is always the same. Later when they build the temple, a lot of these altars and stuff, it's new stuff that Solomon builds. But the ark is the same ark. And it's always got those rings for them to move it. Yeah.
So was the ark hidden while they were moving it? Like, were the people allowed to see it? Or
That's a good
was
question.
It, like, in something where they couldn't see it?
I do not know.
Okay.
It's not a thing that the people are not allowed to see.
Right.
Because, for instance, when the children of Israel go across the Jordan River to go into the Promised Land, who leads them? The priests carrying the ark. And it's when they step into the waters of the Jordan that the waters stop. So it's not that the people aren't allowed to see the ark, it's that the people aren't allowed to go into the Holy of Holies. Right? So yeah, you then also get this thing that starts for at certain times where they'll carry the ark into battle. Sometimes because God tells them to. Sometimes because they decide that it's some sort of lucky charm. And in that occurrence, it doesn't go so well. Okay, so there's holders of the poles again. Then there's a big basin of bronze they have out there. It's water, the washing and this sort of thing. There's all these rituals where the priests got to wash, and they got to wash their body, they got to wash their hands, they got to wash all this stuff. So they always got this big basin of bronze. They make the tent for the courtyard, and all this stuff is made of like fine twined linen threads of silver, and they actually thread gold and silver into what they're weaving. Really, really intricate stuff that they're doing, right? Verses 21 to 31 in chapter 38 tell us how much of each thing was used, right? So the total amount of gold, I've converted this into first our weight measures and then modern day prices. So it's 2,200 pounds of gold that was used in making the temple, which is worth about $50 million in today's money. Then the silver was a little over 7,500 pounds, which is about $3 million in today's money. And I would imagine that the value of both would have been greater comparatively back then. Right? Like things like gold and silver and gems, I think were of far more value compared to other things back then than they are now. But of course they're still worth a lot now. But our economy has changed in so many various ways that I don't think they retain quite the same value compared to other things. But still, that 50 million figure, that's what that much gold is worth today. And now there's 5,000 pounds of bronze, and that's only worth about $10,000 today. But that's another example of a thing that would have been worth a whole lot more back then. Bronze isn't all that important today. We don't use it for all that many things. We use it to make alloys out of. We use it to make things that are better. But they didn't have a lot of those alloys at this time. And so bronze is kind of a big deal in those days too. Still not as expensive as the gold and silver though. Exodus 39, verses 1 to 21 describe the fine yarns that they used. And again, those would be far more costly and unique back then than they are today because nobody's mass producing this stuff, right? They don't have like these, I don't know, whatever we use today to make all kinds of yarn and spools of thread or whatever. Everything has got to be what? Hand woven from wool, and they're weaving it together with gold and silver, so it's very, very fine stuff. The ephod for the priest, that's like this garment that the high priest wears. It's got shoulder pieces that have onyx stones, and they're engraved with the names of the sons of Israel to bring remembrance before the Lord when he's ministering before the Lord, when the priest is doing his work. And then there's a breast piece for the priest, woven of fine yarns, and it has 4 rows of stones, 3 stones in each row. The stones are sardius, topaz, carbuncle, emerald, sapphire, diamond, jacinth, agate, amethyst, beryl, onyx, and jasper. 12 stones for the 12 sons of Israel. Now, if you remember reading ever in Revelation about the description of the New Jerusalem, it talks about these gates and these precious stones. And a lot of them are the same, and there might be some differences in words that are being used. They might all be the same. And it says many of the same things, like 12 stones to the 12 tribes of Israel. In the New Testament, what does that refer to? In the Old Testament, the 12 sons of Israel refers to what? The 12 tribes of Israel, right? Like the actual people of Israel. In the New Testament, what does it refer to?
The church.
The church. Yeah, absolutely. And that's also why, by the way, you have this thing in Revelation with 24 elders. 12 and 12. 12 sons of Israel for the Old Testament church, the 12 apostles representing the New Testament church, because through the apostles, their preaching of Christ's word, you get the church, right? So you get 12 and 12, 24. Those are always church numbers. That's what God's always talking about when he brings those up. 22 through 31, there's a robe of the ephod, which is made of blue, and it has bells on it. Okay? So I was reading this, and I was thinking of that Aesop's fable where the mice have their convention, and they're like, how do we stop the cat from getting us? And then one mouse was like, let's put bells on it so we can know you're coming. And then they're all like, who's going to do that? Okay? Well, it's not quite the same idea, but the priest wears bells. Why? Right? Not so the people know when the priest is coming and they can like stop whatever sinful thing they're doing, but why do you think? Well, they can't see him, but they can hear him. They can't see the priest when he goes into the holy place to minister to the Lord, but when he's moving around and doing these things on their behalf before God, they hear the bells. And that is to tell them, yeah, the priest is ministering before the Lord. Then it talks about these coats and turbans and sashes that they're wearing. It's very intricate. By the way, when you get into Isaiah, you get references to this. So like Isaiah talks about, as a bridegroom decks himself like a priest, so the Lord has adorned me. So it's talking about this image. All the stuff that the priest is wearing is sort of similar to the way that like a bridegroom would get all fancied up for his wedding. And then he takes that image and he brings it over to the church and Christ, and the church being the bride of Christ, and us being decked up with this joy, with this gladness. And that's the image here with the priest. The priest is going before the Lord. There's this celebration. There's a lot of things here about that are like, awesome. But then there's also this joy and this like celebration before the Lord, sort of this festival. They're also, like most of these things have this engraving, or a lot of them, that says holy to the Lord. This is holy to the Lord, set apart for service to the Lord. So after they make all these things, they bring it all, they put it all up, just as God commanded Moses. He gave very specific rules for every single thing that they made for the temple. Like down to the finest detail of how they're supposed to make it. Now, I have a few questions. Why spend so much money on this? I mean, children of Israel are a lot larger group than the CLC, but fairly comparable to like the Missouri Synod in size. Okay, so say the Missouri Synod was like let's build a church that's worth $60 million. Cost us $60 million to build. People might have complaints about that. Why do this?
Well, because when God told them to.
Well, why does God do it?
Because he wants it to be a big deal.
He does want it to be a big deal. Tabernacle, a temple, which will be even more expensive than the tabernacle. He wants it to be a huge deal. This is the single place on earth, he is saying, where I will come and bless my people. It's not like he's not present everywhere, right? That's not the idea. But this is, we would say this is like his sacramental presence, where he is using physical means and promised to come among his people in these visual ways, through the sacrifices and all this stuff, because all this stuff is prophesying Christ, and God would say, no expense spared there. And he wants the people to know that this is their entire purpose. He's like, yeah, give all that you have. And remember, they gave all this freely. They freely gave. He didn't set them a number. They freely gave, and we're willing to give more than like $60 million worth of stuff for this. This is more important than anything else they got going on, and it's not close. Now, I think this is worth considering. Like, I'll come back to this slide in a second because I have some more questions. What might this example cause us to repent of?
Instead of not wanting to give.
That could be one thing, of being a stingy in our giving. You know, the children really kind of maybe show us up a little bit. Sometimes. I don't know, that's personal. That's a personal question, right? You know, I think as Americans, we tend to be pretty like pragmatic with a lot of things. It's kind of a cultural thing, right? Most of our churches are pretty plain Jane, and that's not wrong. The New Testament doesn't give us commands for how they should be. But maybe sometimes we're a little too critical of the idea of expense towards beauty in the structures that we use in the worship of God. Sometimes it's just because we can't, you know. That can be a different question, right? This is all about motives. This is all about, you know, reasoning, right? Like for instance, we are not in a position to be worried about building like whether we even could afford a big and beautiful church, that sort of thing. And nor does one need that. But it's just something that can be helpful to keep in mind. Because sometimes you will get that sort of like, a church will be talking about building a really ornate building, and some people will just be like, well, that's a waste of money. Well, not necessarily. It's definitely not, if it's something that's coming from the arts people, it's most certainly not a waste of money. And that can be sort of similar to like when Mary, the sister of Lazarus, brings an expensive perfume and anoints Jesus' feet. And Judas is like, why would you not sold it, give it to the poor? We could put that money to better use. And Jesus says, no, you couldn't. He says, she's done a beautiful thing for me. That's all he says about it. She's done a beautiful thing for me. And that reminds us that there's great value as God's people in doing beautiful things for God in terms of art. And that's aroma like with her, and this temple and tabernacle like in the Old Testament. How does we kind of answered this, but how does it point to the gospel, this expense?
For all the great price.
Yeah. Yep, and you could think of Peter, knowing that you were redeemed, not with perishable things like silver and gold. That's a striking comment, by the way. Why are silver and gold so valuable? Is it just because they look pretty?
Their utility, I think.
They are far more useful than other metals are. And one of the reasons why is that they do not, especially actually gold, silver will tarnish, but gold does not rust or corrode or anything. The special properties like that, right? So notice, in that passage, Peter essentially picks the two least perishable things in God's physical universe and says, guys, you weren't redeemed with any like useless perishable things like silver and gold. Something far more valuable, the precious blood of Christ. And so the use of the most valuable and precious things that they have is meant to reflect the one who is coming to fulfill this all, who's far more valuable than any of them. Why did the priest carry the names of the sons of Israel on his chest?
Weren't the names on the shoulders?
And the shoulders.
Oh, okay.
Shoulders and chest. Shoulders on the onyx stones, chest. There's other stones, and then there's also, like, doesn't say this one here, but there's also like this little like door. It's like opens. And there's like the names on there.
Like the name of the church is on your heart?
He's bringing to remembrance before God, right? He's going to God on behalf of all the people. Now, this also is a picture of Christ. Christ goes to the Father with you on his heart to bring you to remembrance before the Father. And not once a year, and not by means of a sacrifice first for his own sins, but in heaven, constantly ministering before the Father for you, the intercessor. That's what he means when he talks about with this language. He's referring to these Old Testament things and saying, hey, guys, I'm the high priest who's there with the Father, interceding on your behalf always, bringing you to remembrance. I think it's kind of the last thing today. Why is God such a micromanager with all of this? In a good way, with the Old Testament. I'm not trying to criticize God's micromanaging. He is a micromanager in the Old Testament with regard to their religious laws, but kind of the opposite today. He doesn't tell us very much about how we're to worship today. Why? Why does he go from that to that? Just every single thing to just a few kind of directives.
The old shadows of things to come, and now that's been fulfilled in the New Testament.
Yeah. All these fine details basically meant to keep Israel different. He wants to make it obvious to the world that they're different. And that the reason they're different is the coming one. He wants to keep them focused. He wants every single little thing of their worship to remind them of Christ. Now Christ has come. And so now, the single thing that he tells us is that our worship is focused on Christ. And he gives us the ways. He tells us the things we're to do because they're the ways that Christ comes to us, that we're to have the Word, and we're to have the sacraments. Those are the things that our worship is to be focused on. And because those are the ways that Christ comes to us. And he tells us general principles too, like it should be orderly, right? He tells us that we should be singing hymns and songs. He tells us these things, but he doesn't tell us which ones or how often or what they mean or anything like that, because of the freedom that Christ brings. It's all an image of this, like the law, kind of straitjacket, and then the gospel is the freedom. It also describes it as the difference between like being a child who needs to have everything regulated and then coming into adulthood, where the New Testament church is the church coming into adulthood because Christ has come and has this freedom of the gospel. And it's important, I mentioned this before, but last thought, it's important when we talk about that to understand that this freedom that we have of the gospel, Christian freedom, is not a discussion ender. Sometimes people will be like, hey, we can do whatever we want because Christian freedom. Discussion over. If you're using Christian freedom as a discussion ender, you're wrong. If you're using it as a discussion starter, that's the right place. What I mean by that is, it's saying we have this freedom. That means now the discussion begins in Christian love about how best in our particular place and way to present Christ and the worship of Christ. So it's not a zinger, it's not an ender, it's a beginner. Any questions? All right, let's close with the doxology. Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise Him, all creatures here below.